There's something I want to address before actually starting the review. Video games have followed the same line as most mediums. Similarly to books, different styles of paintings, movies, and television, the acceptance of the medium has grew over time. People thought that it was a vulgar thing or a thing for kids, that it wasn't art. Now the medium has mainstream acceptance, and people don't think twice about it. Like gay people. Except that unlike gay people, they don't go after your kids. Well, most of the time. However, right now, video games are stuck in this phase, let's call it phase 4, where people accept it, but still doubt it as value as art. One of the ways people express that doubt is by saying things like, "You only like this game because you played it when you were a kid," or "This is a game of its time, it hasn't aged well." Nobody thinks that you prefer old movies because you saw it as a kid. Unless it's something that's really suspicious in terms of quality like the Star Wars prequel. Otherwise, people accept old media, unless it's video games. I will admit that bad games exist, especially in the early generations from the first to the fourth, basically Atari to NES. They were still figuring out what they were doing. However, there's quite a difference between having a game that was never good and a game that demands to adapt to a difficulty curve. A curve also doesn't necessarily mean the actual progression, but just learning to handle the game. Most games used to have varying level of control schemes. There was codification, especially later on with each genre, or with basic things like having start be the pause button, but the 4th to 6th generation still demanded of the players to adapt. It's starting with the 7th generation that things became really limited. Most games now have the same control scheme. The upside is that you can go from game to game with little adjustment. The downside is that you have to learn 10 years of adjustments to what boils down to a single control scheme. There's a reason why Western games layer tutorial on top of one another. It's never ending. Indie and Japanese games are more natural and gradual. The skill ceiling is high, but after 30 minutes to an hour you get used to it. All of this to say that Destroy All Humans 2 Reprobed is a pretty fine game. Its greatest flaw is that it doesn't answer to the sensibilities of the modern video game journalists. The game is actually better than the first one. It fixes a lot of the issues, and I'm not necessarily talking about the remake, but the original version of 2. The remake adds a little bit too. It's just an all-around improvement, and it's longer. In a good way. There's more content. It's not the cliche third-person open-world crafting game. When I saw Forspoken, I sighed at how redundant it looked. People just don't want to get out of their comfort zone. By people, I mean game journalists, and they don't even qualify as human. I have a pretty solid example of what I'm advancing. Resident Evil Remake and Zero both look like they play the same. Some would say that both play terribly or age poorly. However, Remake actually allows the player to do what it demands of them, and by extension, is a good game. You receive the proper tools. Zero still has 10 controls, but there's minute differences that make it unplayable, or for the most part really boring. For example, giving you 2 characters in a game with tight corridors, or monsters not being pushed away after attacking. An issue that was in the first one, but that was fixed in the remake. What happens is that it's pretty easy to get stun locked to fucking death.
Oh, fuck. Whoa. Oh, no. Oh, God.
Whoa.
I just want to get out of here.
No.
I'm
you're
dead. I'm dead
precious.
for sure.
No, you can do it.
Yeah, I'm dead for sure.
No, just press buttons. Yeah. Come on.
This is
do it.
super tough.
If only you had better
I knew
controls.
it. I fucking knew it.
Destroy All Humans 2 has no such issues with its gameplay. It demands something of the player, and it can be accomplished. You're not struggling with the controls. You aim and shoot and it works. Most of the criticism I heard was either straight up stupid or was more appropriate for one. There's no jokes about cryptocurrency? Really, IGN? Also, one definitely felt like the most redundant of the two after replaying it. This game has a much better presentation. It nails the colorful 60s art style. It's how you thought the game looked like back then when it actually didn't. The level of detail is about the same, but there's more to see. The vistas are not that big, but really encapsulate the feeling of each region like a diorama. There's also a lot of skins available, even if most are already unlocked and the rest are DLC. I did wish those were hidden. The dialogue between characters looks less janky, even if it's still shot reverse shot and the cutscenes are generally more animated. Gameplay wise, there's a greater variety of weapons and skills, even if they're not all useful. It's a natural extension of the first title. The saucer also gets more use. Because of the less linear design, you get to walk around and use statues as markers for your ship to drop. The famous Argvoodle idols that the journals all love to hate. The spaceship is not just limited to get into it for boss fights. You travel around and can even cloak. You don't immediately give the alert. Again, an extension of the gameplay. Similarly, on foot, you can use the skill Free Love to make people dance and forget you were here. It gives you time to possess a cop and call on the payphones to drop the alert. Even the side missions are more varied. They have actual dialogue and context for each one, so even if some objectives repeat, it doesn't feel as bad. The rest is pretty comparable to the first: story, music, and sounds. I do have to say the story and jokes get me a bit more engaged than in the first title. While some of the jokes are dated, particularly the fourth wall breaking ones, their writing is quite clever at times. Otherwise, there's only two real complaints that stick out to me. As I said, the experience is quite entertaining otherwise. Number 1, the performance issues are not massive, but they exist. Mostly FPS drops. I heard the console versions had quite the hard time, and some people on both platforms got issues with game-breaking glitches, missions being locked out. It's a bit cumbersome, especially since the first title had little issues regarding performances. Number 2 is that politically, I don't think the game necessarily stands on that fringe far left, but you can absolutely see how long that side has been at it. A game that draws immediate comparison is No One Lives Forever. Another game taking place in the 60s that features a female protagonist who's a spy and wants to be treated like a man. Here's the issue. There's this long running thought in media that women want to be treated like men and strive for the same things, and that the only way to be acknowledged is to essentially be a man. It's terrifying how you can push terrible ideas into people's minds simply by repeating them over and over and coding them in the allure of being positive. You do not want me to fight a man, therefore you don't believe in me? You don't want me doing the same thing as you? Don't you love me? Don't you think me your equal? In practice, it just means that Fallon Fox almost crushed a poor girl's head. Women don't have the attributes necessary to perform the same task as men, and engaging in such tasks is dangerous for everybody involved. You don't want to judge a fish on its ability to fly. I can also guarantee you women don't want to be treated like men. Stop holding doors for them and they're the first one to complain. I mention this because Natalia, the spy, has a similar complaint, and it's the kind of thing that women repeat without really thinking. Women are interesting to men because they're not men. There is also a missable part about a soldier mentioning that she destroyed him in a wrestling practice. Again, the notion that a woman can do just as well as a man, and that once she does, she now has value as a human being, is actually quite misogynist, ironically. I know a thing or two about combat, and like mentioned earlier with Fallon, women don't have the same abilities. Even the athletic tomboy barely averages an average guy. You might have seen these videos of girls winning against boys, but they all have two things in common. They're fighting guys who are really unathletic, or the guys know a little about what they're doing. Usually when they lose, it's because they get taken to the ground. A bit like striking, jiu-jitsu and wrestling is this sort of chess game, except that you don't really have a puncher's chance like in boxing. You need to know every step in order, and if you can't do the first step, then you're not getting to the second or the third step. And even then, when they do win, they don't even look that good in victory. A male doing the same thing would toy with his opponent. Also, may I remind you that the US national soccer team lost to a bunch of 15-year-old boys. If their male equivalent ran into the same problem, everybody would laugh at them. The fact that we don't say anything about that shows that implicitly people understand that women do not have the same capacities as males, especially not in the physical realm. But we act like we don't understand that. Nobody wants to say a thing because of the general zeitgeist that we have. It also came to light that there was censorship regarding one of the missions in the game. It highlights how much people are in lockstep with this unnatural thinking, and that tyrannical systems only endure because they're repeated ad nauseum by the people. I wouldn't call Destroy All Humans woke, but you realize how far back these postmodernist ideas have been following us. It's just that they were less overt and constant. That or the studio is preparing to bend the knee and become woke. Despite all of this, I would say the game is quite recommendable. It's the most fun I had in a long time, although there were some performance issues. It's still quite playable, and I guess it's time to buy it before the studio becomes progressively worse and worse. Oh, by the way, fuck Razor Cortex. That shit drops my performance like polio with old people. Every update that program gets worse, and the drivers update only made that shit suck even more. You could wait for an update, however, if there's ever one, regarding the game, not Razor Cortex. We assume there's going to be one. Usually there is, if it's not a big AAA game. These studios make their money and don't care for the rest. I'm kind of wary of how future titles are going to be in this franchise. Will we get more censorship? Should I hold out my money? Only the future can tell, but for now I can say that Destroy All Humans 2 is actually pretty fun. Now that I think about it, it's kinda sad that these days when you're having fun, it's because you're playing an indie game or a game that's 20 years old. There's not a lot of new titles that really provoke excitement. Well, at least you didn't fucking shill a ton of money into a new computer only to play old stuff, or stuff that could be played on a toaster.
Shiny cars outside the tall building all look the same.